I can still recall when I first really observed the world around me, not simply gazed at it, but really observed it. I was in my training room, watching students throw punches with correct form, landing kicks with impeccable accuracy. Impeccable accuracy. They were all doing everything they were supposed to be doing, technically, but something was lacking, something that mattered. A young man came up to me after class, frustrated but technically competent. "Master Lee," he complained, "I've learned all the techniques. I've committed all the forms to memory, so when I spar, something's off. I can't connect." I put my hand on his shoulder and asked him a basic question. "When you watch your opponent, what do you see?" He looked puzzled. "I see someone I need to beat." And there it was. The wall that no amount of physical training could breach. The hindrance that no level of practice could overcome. "That," I said to him, "is your first error. What I'm going to teach you isn't in training manuals. It's not learned by observing others or memorizing motions. This knowledge won't be gained by punching harder or kicking quicker. No, the key I'm going to share with you is much stronger, much more life-changing than any physical technique could possibly be. But, I warn you, once you see this truth, you can never turn back. Your vision will be forever changed. The way you look at the world, the way you navigate it, will never again be the same. Are you prepared to look at what's been in front of you all along? The art of true observation starts only when the ego stops. Few ever really look at the world around them. They don't see, they project. Project. They screen everything through their ego, their preconceptions, their wants, their fears. They perceive not what is, but what they wish to perceive, what they expect to perceive, what they have been conditioned to perceive. I taught myself this lesson, not in times of victory, but in times of defeat. Not when I was powerful, but when I was shattered. After settling in Oakland, I was faced with challenges. Not only the physical challenges of instruction or the cultural obstacles that I encountered, but the challenge of my own growing success. The more successful I became, the more ego I developed. And days, the more acclaim I heard, the more I believed in my own legend. Until the night I was alone in my training with a senior student, a gifted warrior who had been with me for years. We were light sparring, and I was, as always, in charge. Or so I believed. With my focus temporarily disrupted by a consideration, a momentary surge of pride in my own skill, my student made a clean hit. Not especially forceful, but definitely clean. Something that never should have occurred. At that moment, something peculiar happened. I sensed a rage building up inside me, not against my student, but against myself. My pride had been hurt, and with that hurt pride, I worked harder. I pressured more quickly. I hit with greater force than was called for in a friendly warm-up session. I noticed fear leap into my student's eyes, and at once I really saw myself, maybe for the first time. I did not see a master instructing a student, but a man dominated by ego, incapable of tolerating even the slightest provocation to his sense of superiority. I did not see wisdom in operation, but pride clamoring for vindication. I ceased at once, bowed to my student, and alone went to the little meditation room off the training floor. There, in silence, I faced the strongest opponent I had ever had. My ego. You meet this same rival every day, don't you? Not only in physical obstacles, but in all areas of your life. When your supervisor criticizes what you do, when a friend challenges your opinion, when someone you don't know cuts you off in traffic, that flash of defensiveness, that wave of self-exoneration, that's your ego struggling to defend its ground. And at those times, you are blind. Blind to reality. Blind to seeing what is, not what threatens who you believe you are. Real observation, seeing what is really in front of you, knowing what is really going on. This is not possible when ego gets in the way. Ego warps everything it touches. It's as if attempting to see clearly through a distorted glass. Everything becomes twisted, distorted, misshapen. In the martial arts, this blindness is deadly. If you cannot look at your opponent with clear vision, not as you want them to be, not as you fear them to be, but as they actually are, you have already lost. If you cannot see without the bias of your ego, you will be defeated before the first punch is thrown. The same principle holds in all aspects of life. How many arguments would be ended if both sides could actually clearly see the situation, free from the ego's desire to be right? How many relationships would be salvaged if we could see our partners for who they really are, not for who we would like them to be? How many times have you lost opportunities because your ego was too preoccupied, protecting its domain to pay attention to what was right before you? Let me share with you the 3 veils of ego that block true observation, 3 obstacles that lie between you and reality. The first veil is expectation. When you go into any situation with hard expectations about how things are supposed to be, about how people are supposed to act, about how things are supposed to go, you've already obscured your vision. Your vision, you're not seeing what is. You're just looking for validation of what you're expecting. I saw this all the time in my early years of teaching. Students would approach me having read about my philosophy, having seen my demonstrations, having gotten a picture in their minds of what training with Bruce Lee would be like. And when reality didn't live up to their expectations, when the training was tougher than they'd anticipated, when the concepts were more complex than they'd envisioned, they couldn't appreciate the worth of what was really in front of them. Their expectations had blinded them. The second veil is judgment. The instant you categorize something as good or bad, as right or wrong, as worthy or unworthy in that very instant, you've stopped seeing it at all. You've substituted the richness of what is with the reductionism of a judgment. I recall observing 2 of my students sparring. One was technically skilled, but inflexible in his mind. After every sequence, he would immediately qualify what had occurred. That was a good counter. That footwork was sloppy. That defense was weak. And in his incessant judging, he lost the rhythm of the exchange, the patterns unfolding, the opportunities arising. He was unable to respond accordingly because he was so concerned with judging that he could not actually notice. The third and most deadly veil is identification. When you are so identified with your thoughts, your beliefs, your position that you are them, you can no longer see. Your identity is threatened by anything that opposes these elements of yourself, and observation becomes impossible. Throughout my years in Hollywood, I was consistently confronted with this veil. People weren't merely grasping concepts about martial arts or about acting. They were the concepts. Any implication that there could be an alternative, any showing that undermined their conception, was received not as information to be noted, but as a personal affront to be defended. These three veils of expectation, of judgment, of identification, they don't only obscure your eyes in the martial arts. They blind you to all things in life. They separate you from reality like a solid fog, bending everything you think you perceive. But there is a way beyond the fog. There is a path to clear perception. It starts with an easy awareness. You are not your ego. You are not what you think about yourself. You are not your successes. You are not your failures. You are not your reputation. You are not what other people think of you. You are not even what you think of yourself. The ego is just a fiction, a helpful fiction maybe, but a fiction nonetheless. And when you come to see that, really see it, not just in your head, but in your gut, something remarkable occurs. The veil starts to drop. Real observation becomes possible. I want to tell you about a practice that revolutionized my own capacity to observe. I call it the mirror of awareness. Every morning before I start my physical training, I stand in front of a mirror, not to look at my body or refine my technique, but to build a connection with the observer in myself. I gaze into my own eyes and ask, who is looking? Who is aware right now? With regular practice, you start to see that there are two separate parts of yourself. The ego self that is ever chattering, judging, wanting, fearing, and the aware self that is witnessing all this. The ego self is like the ocean surface, ever changing, stirred by every breeze that blows. The aware self is like the depths, depths, unmoving, transparent, unchanged. When you learn to relate to this aware self instead of the ego self, real observation starts. You no longer perceive the world through the distortions of expectation, judgment, and identification. You see what is really in front of you. In combat, this change of perspective is nothing short of revolutionary. When I engage with an opponent from the standpoint of my ego, I'm ensnared in a trap of thoughts. Will I prevail? What if I lose? What technique shall I employ? What will other people think? These thoughts instill tension, hesitation, blindness. But when I encounter an opponent from the awareness beyond ego, something surprising occurs. I don't think about losing or winning. I don't care about how I appear or what others think. I just see clearly, directly, without distortion. I observe not what I hope to observe or what I am afraid to observe, but what is present. And from that clear seeing, natural, effortless action springs up, like water running downhill. This place, seeing without ego, is what I am referring to when I say I am like water. Water does not attempt to be water. Water does not think about being water. Water just is water, acting in perfect response to every circumstance because it is free from the distortions of ego. When water meets a rock, it doesn't become angry or frustrated. It doesn't attempt to push through. It just flows around. When water is in a cup, it doesn't mind the limitation. It just forms according to the cup. Water always behaves perfectly according to its situation because there is no ego causing resistance to what is. This is the heart of Jeet Kune Do. Not a technique set, but a condition of clear seeing that generates correct action. If you are able to actually see, unbiased by ego, efficient action will naturally follow. But don't think for a moment that this is an easy state to achieve. The ego doesn't relinquish its hold without a struggle. It's been your loyal companion for so long that you've confused it with yourself. Letting it go is a form of death, and in some ways, it is. It's the loss of an illusion. but one you've been living with so long that it's become real. Let me describe the day I lived this ego death most intensely. I was working out alone on a late night, pushing myself past exhaustion, as was my custom. My body was screaming for rest, but my ego, constantly demanding more, constantly insisting I wasn't yet good enough, kept driving me forward. As one particularly intense series was underway, I sensed something giving way in my back. The pain hit instantly and was overwhelming. I fell to the floor, immobile, unable to catch my breath. At that point of total hopelessness, something remarkable occurred. As the physical pain reached its crescendo, my mind suddenly quieted. The incessant verbal diarrhea of my ego, its demands, its fears, its relentless self-judgment, all ceased. And in that quiet, I felt a clarity of vision I had never felt before. I saw my circumstances with complete clarity, not as a disaster, not as a failure, not as something to judge or resist, but simply as what was. I saw my body not as something to force beyond limits, but as something to heal, something to heal. I saw my ambition not as a virtue, but as an attachment that was bringing suffering. Most of all, I realized that I wasn't my ego. I was the awareness witnessing the ego, and in that realization, I experienced a liberty no physical skill could ever grant. This is what I'm asking you to find out. Not some philosophical abstraction, but a lived realization of seeing through the ego, an experience that will change not only how you engage in combat, but how you live. How do you peel away the veils that keep you from clearly seeing? Let me pass along 4 practices I've distilled from years of experiment. They are not speculative exercises. They are experiential aids that, applied regularly, will radically sharpen your capacity for observation free of the distortions of ego. First, the physical attention practice. Start each morning by focusing your full attention on simple bodily sensations. Notice the pressure of your body against the chair or ground. Notice the breath moving in and out of your lungs. Notice the sensations in your hands, your feet, your face. Don't evaluate these sensations as good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant. Just notice them with full attention. Why is this significant? Because physical sensations are occurring in the present moment, and the ego is limited to being able to function in the thought world, memories of past or anticipations about the future. By grounding your attention in physical sensation, you are outside of the ego's sphere. You establish space between you and your ego-charged thoughts. I apply this awareness of bodily sensation to all my waking hours. Teaching, training, eating, walking down the street, I continuously return my awareness to the immediate body experience. This grounds me in reality and not lost in the ego's translations. Second, the exercise of naming and shaming. When you catch yourself becoming emotionally reactive, angry, defensive, insecure, proud, pause and mentally label what's occurring. My ego is feeling threatened. Then imagine the shape this reaction is taking in your body. Where on your body is it occurring exactly? What size is it? What color would it be if you were able to see it? It makes a fundamental distinction between you yourself as the observer, and your ego reaction that you're having, rather than being your anger, you're viewing your anger. Rather than being your insecurity, you're seeing it come up and form. This tiny change in awareness is the start of liberation from ego. Third, the exercise of the neutral gaze. Most people view the world through a greatly filtered lens, constantly judging, evaluating, putting into categories. Practice viewing people, situations, and even your own thoughts through what I call the neutral gaze, seeing what's actually present rather than what you think about what's present. When you gaze at someone, are you able to look at them clearly without immediately labeling them as unattractive or attractive, enemy or friend, valuable or worthless to you? When you enter a room, can you notice what's really there without grading it on your scale of good and evil? This impartial view is not saying that you never judge or make distinctions. Those are a requirement for living in the world. It is saying that you see clearly first and then judge when necessary, but in a way that doesn't prevent you from seeing clearly in the first place. Fourth and most difficult, the practice of accepting contradiction. The ego desires consistency and certainty. It wishes to be correct. It wishes all to comfortably fit within its current system of knowledge. Confronted with contradiction or paradox, the ego becomes profoundly uneasy. Why, knowing all the right moves, could he not apply that knowledge into practical action? The answer is evident now. He could not actually see his adversary. He was so preoccupied with thoughts concerning himself, about winning and losing, about being good, about proving himself, that he was oblivious to what actually stood before him. His pride had put up a veil between him and what was real. I took him off to a special training session. The one who perceives not what might be, not what should be, but what is, and in that transparent seeing, you will discover a power and peace which no amount of struggle could ever offer.